On March 9th, 2025, about an hour before I planned to lock up the shop, a clean white Camry rolled into my bay with a misfire so faint you could barely feel it at idle. The owner wasn't panicking. He was proud. He told me he'd just done his own spark plugs that weekend, top-quality iridium, torqued by hand, and he'd even done the one thing the dealership never bothers to do. He smiled when he said it. He'd coated the threads in anti-seize. Today, I'm going to show you why that single, well-meaning decision is the most expensive spark plug mistake a Toyota owner can make, why almost everyone does it, and why the 1% who avoid it are the ones whose engines quietly outlast everyone else's. I've been turning wrenches for over 2 decades, and I want you to understand something before we go any further. This man did not neglect his car. He did the opposite. He researched. He bought the right plugs. He used a torque wrench. He cared more than 90% of the drivers who come through my door. And that is exactly what makes this so important, because the mistake he made is not a lazy mistake. It is a careful mistake. It is the kind of thing passed down from fathers, from old mechanics, from 100 YouTube videos, and it made perfect sense 30 years ago. It just happens to be wrong on a modern Toyota, and the engine almost never tells you in time. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. The spark plugs in your Toyota are not the simple steel parts your grandfather used to gap with a coin and smear with grease. The factory plugs, the Denso and NGK iridium units Toyota actually engineers around, already have an anti-seize built directly into them. The threads carry a special trivalent plating, a thin silver or chrome-colored coating that resists corrosion and acts as a release agent when the plug comes out years later. The plug is designed from the factory to be installed completely dry. That coating is not decoration. It is doing the exact job that the tube of anti-seize in your garage thinks it is doing, except it does it without changing anything else about how the plug behaves. So when you add anti-seize on top of a plug that is already coated, you are not adding protection. You are adding a lubricant where the engineers assumed there would be friction. And friction, it turns out, is the whole reason a torque wrench works. Let me explain what actually happens, because this is the part nobody walks you through. When you torque a dry spark plug to spec, say roughly 13 to 18 pound-feet on most Toyota engines, that number assumes a certain amount of resistance in the threads. The wrench clicks when the twisting force hits the target, but the wrench cannot tell the difference between resistance from clamping the plug correctly and resistance from friction. It just feels total resistance. Now slick those threads with anti-seize. You have removed friction. So the wrench clicks at the same number, but a much larger share of that force went into actually crushing the plug down into the head. Denso and NGK both warn about this directly. NGK states that anti-seize can throw your torque off by as much as 20%. Denso goes further and tells you that if you insist on using it, you must reduce your torque by roughly 1/3 to compensate. Almost nobody does that. They set the wrench to the factory number, hear the click, and walk away convinced they did everything right. In reality, they just over-torqued every plug in the engine by a significant margin, and they have no idea, because the click told them they were perfect. Now here is where a small mistake becomes a catastrophe in slow motion. Toyota cylinder heads are aluminum. Aluminum is light, it sheds heat beautifully, and it is soft. The spark plug threads are cut into that soft aluminum, and the steel plug is far harder than the metal it is threading into. When you over-torque a steel plug into an aluminum head, a few things can happen, and none of them are good. You can stretch the metal shell of the plug itself, which sounds harmless until you understand that stretching the shell changes the plug's heat range, the carefully engineered rate at which it sheds combustion heat. A plug running the wrong heat range can drift toward pre-ignition, where the fuel lights off before the spark even fires. And pre-ignition is one of the few things that can genuinely destroy a piston. You can also gall the threads, dragging soft aluminum and tearing it as the plug bottoms out. Worst of all, you can crack the thin bridge of aluminum between the plug hole and the valves, and once that happens, the repair is not a spark plug. The repair is pulling the cylinder head and sometimes replacing it. A $15 tube of anti-seize can write a several $1,000 invoice, and the engine will not warn you. That's the cruelty of it. It doesn't misfire on the drive home. The threads don't strip the moment you start it. The damage is mechanical and patient. It sits there for months while the metal fatigues under heat cycles, and then one day, a plug blows out under compression, or a tech goes to remove it years later and pulls a chunk of your cylinder head out with it. The man with the Camry hadn't broken anything yet. He'd planted the seed and didn't know it. But over-torquing isn't even the only way anti-seize hurts you. And this is the part that surprised the Camry owner most. That faint misfire I mentioned at the start? That came from the grease itself. Anti-seize is an electrical insulator and a thermal one. A spark plug doesn't just sit in the head looking pretty. It uses its threads and its seat as a path to dump combustion heat into the cylinder head, and it uses that same metal-to-metal contact as part of its ground circuit. When you pack the threads with a non-conductive compound, you interfere with both. You slow the heat transfer, and you can degrade the ground path. And if any of that compound migrates up onto the insulator or the firing tip, which it loves to do under heat and vibration, it can foul the spark directly. That's a misfire with no broken part to find, no cracked coil, no bad plug. Just contamination doing exactly what physics says it will do. I cleaned his plugs, reinstalled them dry to the correct torque, and the misfire was gone before he finished his coffee. So, why does almost everyone get this wrong? Because for most of automotive history, anti-seize on spark plugs was correct. Old plugs had bare steel threads and no plating, and they were screwed into cast iron heads, and they would absolutely seize if you left them in too long. An entire generation of mechanics learned correctly that a smear of anti-seize saved you a nightmare at the next change. That advice was right. It's just decades out of date. The plugs changed. The metallurgy changed. The heads changed from iron to aluminum. The coatings changed. But the habits survived, passed mouth to mouth and video to video, long after the engineering reason for it disappeared. That is why this is the mistake that careful people make. The careless owner never touches his plugs at all. It's the diligent one, the one who watched a tutorial and bought a torque wrench and wanted to do it right, who reaches for the anti-seize because someone he trusted once told him to. And here's the part that should make you a little angry. A lot of shops still do this too. Some do it out of the same old habit. Some do it because a seized plug on a customer's car years later is a headache they would rather avoid, and they would rather risk the slow damage than the immediate callback. And almost none of them recalculate the torque the way Denso tells you to, so even paying a professional is not a guarantee you avoided this. The 1% isn't defined by whether you did the job yourself or paid someone. It's defined by whether the plugs went in dry, clean, and torqued to the real number. So let me tell you exactly how the 1% do it, because once you see it, it is almost insultingly simple. They buy the correct factory spec iridium plug for their engine. Denso or NGK, the same plug Toyota designed around, not a cheaper substitute with a different heat range. They leave the threads exactly as they come out of the box, dry. They do not gap them. Modern fine wire iridium plugs come pre-gapped from the factory, and that iridium center electrode is delicate. Dragging a coin-style gapping tool across it, the way people used to gap old plugs, can chip the tip and ruin a brand new plug in 2 seconds. You can verify the gap exists with a wire gauge if you want peace of mind, but you do not bend it, and you never let a tool touch that center electrode. Then they start the plug by hand, threading it in with their fingers first, so they know it is not cross-threaded into that soft aluminum. They run it down until it is snug, and only then do they put a torque wrench on it and bring it to the factory spec, dry, and stop the instant it clicks. No grease, no guessing, no second pass to make sure it is really tight. Tight is the enemy here, not the goal. That is the whole secret. It is not a special tool or a hidden product. It is the discipline to do less than your instincts tell you to do. Now I want to be honest with you, the same way I'd be honest with someone standing in my bay, because knowing when this matters is as important as knowing the trick itself. There are old engines, genuinely old cast iron applications with bare thread plugs, where a light film of anti-seize is still appropriate. This is not a universal commandment against the product. It's specifically about modern plated iridium plugs in aluminum heads, which is what virtually every Toyota built in the last 20+ years has under the hood. And if you ever do choose to use it on something, the rule is absolute. Reduce your torque to compensate, keep it off the tip and the insulator, and use a trace, not a coating. The mistake isn't owning anti-seize. The mistake is treating a modern Toyota like a 1975 pickup. It's also worth knowing that this connects to a bigger pattern. Toyota's iridium plugs are rated to last around 100,000 to 120,000 miles, which means most people only do this job once or twice in the life of the car. You don't get many chances to get it wrong, and you don't get many chances to get it right. The driver who over-torques greased plugs at 60,000 miles may not see the consequences until the next owner pulls them at 160. That's part of why this mistake hides so well. The cause and the failure can be a decade apart. So here's what I want you to take away. The most reliable engines on the road did not get that way by accident, and they did not get that way through some expensive secret. They got there because someone, at the one moment that mattered, resisted the urge to do extra. They installed the plug exactly the way it was engineered to be installed, dry and to spec, and then they left it alone. The 1% aren't smarter or richer. They simply unlearned a piece of advice that used to be true and stopped letting an old habit make a soft aluminum head pay for it. The man with the Camry drove off relieved, a little humbled, and frankly luckier than he knew because he caught it in time. Most people don't find out until the head comes off. If this changed how you think about a job you assumed you already knew, hit like so more Toyota owners see it before they grab that tube of anti-seize. Subscribe if you want straight answers that protect your engine and your wallet instead of draining both. And if a shop ever greased your plugs and torqued them to the dry specification anyway, tell me about it in the comments. The most expensive mistakes are almost never the careless ones. They are the careful ones made for the wrong reasons, and now you know enough to never make this one.